couch with me, Ama Pratt. Well, this is a Thursday edition of the show, and you know that on Thursdays we tackle hard talk issues. Today we are doing a bit of politics, and we are doing African politics. You know, we want to zoom our lenses in on the continent and look at some of the movements that we have within the continent, perhaps their themes, you know, what their objectives are, the role we all can play in achieving the purpose of some of these movements, and perhaps the way forward for us as a people and as a continent. I welcome you to the couch. Thank you for staying with Pan-African TV, and I hope you do, enjoy this program as always. Well, to start out, say that we take a quick break so that you drink some Ultimate water, because you know that they are proud supporters of the show. And so I would ask that we take a quick break now, drink some Ultimate water, come back, I introduce my guests, and then we get into the conversation. Stay with me.
Today, we can't trust sources of water anymore. Confidence is gone due to human activities. Same human activities introduces well-mechanized machines which purifies water. I bring to you ultimate natural mineral water. Deep from underground, tasty, well-purified and corporately packaged. Ultimate natural mineral water. Let's drink the new. For bulk, call 020-379-1888 or 0244-515-801. Ultimate natural mineral water. My water, your water, our water.
Welcome back from the break, viewers. If you're just joining in, today we are discussing Africans Rising, and I am privileged to have with me in the studio Mr. Muhammed Lamin Saidykhan, who happens to be the movement coordinator for Africans Rising. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome. And how long have you been in Ghana?
3 days now.
3 days. How are you finding Ghana?
Yeah, it's great. I think people are accommodative, they're friendly, and nice people.
Nice people.
Yeah.
As nice as the people in, where you come from?
In the Gambia and Senegal.
Gambia and Senegal.
The Gambia is called the Smiling Coast of Africa.
The Smiling Coast of Africa.
So okay. Senegal is called the Land of Taranga. Okay. But I think I found that hospitality in Ghana, I found that smiles on the faces of Ghanaian people as well.
Oh yes, we do. We are very good with smiles here.
Yeah,
I
think Africa in general is like people are friendly and then they are nice people.
Yes.
That's the beauty of being African.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So let's talk about Africans Rising. That's a movement.
Yeah. What
is it? Why? First of all, why is there a need for a movement like that, Africans Rising? Why?
Great.
First, then we can talk about, perhaps your vision and your mission for the continent.
Yeah, I think the civil society on the continent felt that they are not been very much relevant to the African people and the issues that African people are crying around. So in 2014, there was a consultation around the whole continent. About 4,000 people were consulted to understand what are the real needs of the civil society or African people in terms of the African civil society. But we realized that in that process of consultation, people were mentioning that, African issues have been responded, when Africans are in challenges, have been responded by the West. I mean, there's time for civil society for them to organize properly to be able to deal with African issues without waiting for Western support.
Okay.
So from that idea of consultation, we converged in Tanzania, in Arusha, around the mountain Kilimanjaro, where we developed the concept and then developed the vision, what we call the Kilimanjaro Declaration, which is the founding charter of the Africans Rising movement. So people felt that, we need to have a movement on the continent that is able to unify all the different movement struggles around the continent. So it's like Africans Rising is a Pan-African movement of movements that is trying to amplify, connect, and then support the local struggles of the African people wherever they find themselves in. And when we are in that conversation, in that convergence, about 44 countries were present from different civil society organizations that converge, that conceive the idea of the Pan-African Africans Rising.
Okay, so what this is that, please correct me if I'm wrong, do you work with specific organizations on the ground, or is it open to any organization on the ground?
Yeah, it's open to any civil society organization. When I talk about civil society, I'm talking about people in the faith base, people in the trade unions, people in the media, people in the sports, people in art, people in all the disciplines of civil society, even traditional NGOs are part of the African Rising movement. So they are organizations, they are individuals who are also part of the Pan-African movement.
Great. So are there specific organizations you work with presently? I mean, you're open to everybody, but are there specific ones that you work with presently?
Yeah, right now there's a process of being able to capture who we work with, and then we have been sending out calls for people to register. A simple form.
You have to register.
Yeah, people to register easily to become captured in the database. But not registering doesn't mean that we don't work with you. So it's like people registering, about 373 organizations have registered already on the continent and as well in diaspora. And as well about 10,000 people have also registered to become individual members of the movement. And then the movement is trying to see how we can create that Pan-African solidarity on the struggles of African people. Okay,
great. So say I register.
Yeah.
What am I signing up for? What does it mean to be a member of this movement?
You're signing up to become part of a Pan-African solidarity movement of movements. You're signing up to support your brothers and sisters on the continent who are struggling for social justice, issues of social justice, issues of economic empowerment of the African people. When we are putting the African Rising movement together, we felt that our issues are always addressed with the support of the West. So we said to ourselves that it's high time for us now to work together as African people, to be able to work on our issues with our own resources, with our own capability and our own mentality. Like when issues happen in Africa, we always look low upon ourselves as African people. So when the civil society met in Arusha, we felt that we need to do our things in our own way. We have all what it takes. The African continent is the richest continent on earth. And then the human capital that the world is looking for is in Africa. But all the time, we don't trust ourselves. So this movement is kind of reinventing and bringing that trust in us.
Okay. I'm sorry that my question seems so fundamental and perhaps mundane, but I just want to do a bit of house cleaning and then we can move ahead. I want to understand the concept properly. I'm sure my viewers too, so we can move ahead. So how are we doing this? How are we achieving this aim? Say I have an organization, a movement, an NGO, whatever, locally, and I sign up, to Africans Rising. How am I? So now I'm part of a bigger
federation or a bigger family.
So, but how am I involved? What do I do realistically on the ground? What does it mean if I'm a member of African? Are we having meetings? Is there an agenda? Do I have specific tasks? Like how?
All right, great. That's a great question, and I like it actually. So, people work on different issues. They work on different struggles that they want to see addressed. That's why even organizations are created. People have different desires of wanting to see certain change. They come together and create organizations or groups. So Africans Rising work with those groups or individuals who are challenging authority or who are working on certain particular issues that is affecting them, and try to mobilize the continent, other movements, other organizations to support the agenda of this particular struggle. Like when we put in the Kilimanjaro Declaration together, we said to ourselves that the African Rising movement need to be responsive to Africans in crisis. And I'll give you some examples of what have been done already when the movement is created. When the Gambian people were in the front line of kicking out that terrible dictator, Jammeh, the movement said to itself, Gambian people are in the front line and then they are putting their lives on the line. Can we mobilize the continent to support Gambia to have a peaceful transfer of power? The African Rising movement sent in what they call the Solidarity Mission. The Solidarity Mission came into the Gambia. And they discussed with the opposition. They tried to meet with the president, the government, the then government. They tried to meet, also bring the civil society together, the movements on the ground. Try to tell them that, when you are coming together, you create a bigger power. So it's like bringing the civil society energy together to be able to champion common causes that people want to see change around. Also, supporting different elements and different issues of the civil society. So creating an alliance on different issues that the civil society are working on. We also support specific civil society capacity development needs. Like civil society are interested in securing themselves. Like right now I'm in Ghana because I'm here, we are supporting activists from Togo and other places around digital security, trying to ensure that they can get themselves secured online, but also get themselves secured as being aware of threats that are surrounding them as activists. We also organize residencies where activists from across the continent will come and share, learn from each other, but also get inspiration from the work that they're doing, that change is possible. But also get inspiration from other activists that are within the continent and also out of the continent, to learn from each other and see how they can advance their causes, but also to use that time to rest a bit and then go back with strong energy. So
rejuvenate.
Kind of. Yeah. So
rejuvenate.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's look at the theme. The theme for Africans Rising. It's justice, it's peace, it's dignity.
Yeah.
Why these specific themes? I'm just curious. Why justice? Why peace? Why dignity? Why peace?
So the movement actually in itself is based on the foundation of unity.
Okay.
So it's like the movement is created to continue the achievement of the true liberation of Africa, where our forefathers left it, the Kurumas and others, where they left it. We want to continue the journey to achieving the true liberation. When I talk about the true liberation, I'm talking about the economic liberation. All the other follows social liberation and other aspects of where the society wants to liberate itself out of all the injustices that they are facing. So from that moment, we said the foundation of it is based on unity, that we need to unite as African people. Without unity, we cannot achieve anything as people of Africa. But after that unity, what do we want? We want to see justice. We want to see wherever there is injustices to be dealt with. But we also want to see what? We want to see peace prevail. And then the last bit of it is we want to see human dignity for the African people. The African people must be valued. They must be valued as human beings. They cannot be humiliated, or they cannot be tortured, or they cannot be treated as inhuman that we have been seeing happening across the world. Yeah.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, so now let's look at perhaps, and you are in a great position to do this for me. Let's look at the continent generally. Let's give some commentary, on our present day situation. Now, obviously, if justice is an aspiration and peace is an aspiration and dignity is an aspiration, then the situation can't be too great, or is it?
Yeah, actually, if those aspirations are achieved, then the Africa we want, the Africa that everyone is talking about, the AU and all the other players are talking about, eventually will achieve.
So let's talk about the African we have.
Yes.
There's the African we want. But let's do a bit of a self, what's the word?
Assessment or whatever.
Thank you, self-assessment. Let's look at the African we have. As somebody who works on the continent, within the continent, you go from country to country, mobilizing movements and all of these things. What's your general assessment of the African continent today?
Yeah, the African continent is promising in certain ways. The young people are waking up. They are challenging powers that we have not been seeing in previous years. The young people are getting more organized. We've seen people, using digital technology to getting more organized. But there are a lot of challenges that we face as African people. One of the key fundamental challenge for me is leadership.
Leadership.
Yeah. It's one of the key challenge for me is, we need these strong leaders who will be able to build what we call strong institutions that will, champion and then moderate the cause of change that we desire to see as African people. So because we don't have that strong leadership to moderate and shape strategically the institutions to be created, we've seen a lot of challenges that we are facing with. We're facing with corruption. That is kind of now becoming a tradition in many countries.
So essentially, Mohammed, you disagree with Obama. Because when Obama came to Ghana, he said what he thinks the continent needs strong institutions
Yes.
and not strong leaders.
Yeah, Obama
You would say, well, we need the strong leaders to get the strong institutions.
Yes.
Okay.
That's my view. So my view with Obama, yeah, Africa needs strong institutions, but you cannot create the institutions when you don't have the strategic vision from the leaders, because the institutions will never be created if you don't have the strong leaders to lay the foundation for the institutional development. And when you have a strong leader who believes in proper democracy, that these institutions will be created by the vision of everyone, like people will tap in, people will join in, and there will be ownership in terms of how these institutions are created. But if it is centered to one individual, it's going to be very difficult. Like countries like US and others who have created the called strong institutions, it's having a collective responsibility in creating those institutions. But they had strong leaders who have a strong vision that helps shape those institutions to be in place. So Africa needs that kind of strong leadership that will listen to the people to create the necessary institutions that are required to be able to forge ahead in terms of the dream Africa that we want to see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now let's stay on this issue of solidarity. I love solidarity. It's a great concept, and perhaps if it's realized, it will be a great thing for the continent. However, within the continent, our needs are very different. I mean, we could look at different countries, perhaps where they are economically, it's not even the same. Socially, we don't, How are we solidarizing with such diverse peculiarities? For instance, the situation in Congo, it's not the same as the situation in Ghana, and it's not the same as the situation in Cameroon or in Nigeria. So how are we actualizing this solidarity when fundamentally, perhaps, I don't know, you tell me, you are the expert, we are so diverse, or our needs are so diverse?
Yeah, actually, African people are very much diverse. I will agree with you. But from the foundation of Pan-Africanism and then the way we live, the way our livelihood settings are, we are kind of very much the same people as African people. If you go fundamentally, if you go to the villages, and you go to do what we call field immersions, or you live with the communities, you see certain practices and certain actions or certain way of living quite similar and quite the same. So the tradition and the way people are living in Africa is similar. But let me just give you an example of why I think the solidarity is something realistic and can work for African people. In our forefathers' time, when one house is burned down to ashes, none of the villagers will sleep until that house is built. So African residents is bringing that in, that kind of spirit that have been there within the families, within the communities, within the countries. And then I will just tell you, it's all around the spirit of Ubuntu, that we need to work together to be able to achieve a better future for ourselves. Let's look at Africa. Africa is said to be the richest continent on earth, and then most of our resources are normally exported out of the continent to process raw materials into finished products, and these finished products are brought back to Africans and sold to Africans. And the process of producing those finished products is creating jobs for people out of the continent, and our people are left with no jobs. So if African governments and leadership, that's why I said we need a leadership, can agree to saying that our raw materials will not be exported out, the processing have to happen here, we can export the finished products out of the continent. If all African countries can agree to that, we'll create jobs for ourselves, and we'll make money for ourselves, and then we will deliver the Africa we want. But it's because the world is dependent on Africa. The reality is the world is dependent on Africa in different aspects. In terms of food production, Africa is the cream of the world. That's where everyone is crossing into. In terms of other materials, resources that the world needs to survive, everyone is coming to Africa to grab it. So it's like, dividing our leaders, fooling them in different ways, in different promises, and then they made our leaders to think about themselves, not about the majority that put them into power. So that's the sad thing about the working around this solidarity. But if we can work together as African people, definitely wherever we want to go in this world, we will be there. And then our people will be achieving what they call the true liberation that they want to see.
True liberation, I love that. And this just popped in my mind as you were speaking. This issue of strong leadership. Are you working with African leaders? And by African leaders, I mean the presidents, you know, the elected executive leaders who are politicians and whose interest sometimes doesn't always align with the interest of the people, because these are key players in achieving, you know, this beautiful vision of a liberated, you know, continent.
We are very much, you know, accommodative in terms of how we approach issues on the continent. Like, one of the key things that we do is when Africans are in crisis, we respond to those crises. When we respond to any country's crisis, when we are in that country, we work with the government, we work with the opposition, we work with the civil society to ensure that we hear stories or both sides of the story. And ensure that, you know, governments are giving recommendations in terms of what they can do. So in certain countries where democracy is embraced strongly, we work closely with the government. We tell the government things that they're doing right, and we encourage them to do things that they're doing right. And then we tell them things that they're not doing right, and then call on them to change certain ways of working. But the whole continent itself, the leadership needs to understand that it is time for African leaders or Africans to work together on common interests. That it's time for us to think about, okay, a particular country have this particular mineral, like for example oil, or for example copper. Africa is having most of the copper that is produced and processed in the world is based in Africa, in Zambia and other places. So if all the countries that have copper in Africa agree that the processing of copper have to be done in Africa, how many jobs are we going to create for ourselves in that kind of agreement? If all the African countries have agreed that, okay, anything about timber that has been sold or processed, it has to be processed within Africa. How many jobs can we create for ourselves? So it's about, you know, telling the leaders the vision that will interest the citizenry that they are
I really
represented.
like what you said. So you come in and meet the people at the point of their need, and obviously that gets you one foot through the door with that activity. All right, I want us to take a break. I want you to drink some water.
All right,
so we will take a break at this point. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Memo wako abadeba O2 TV. And yet yes ya bontin ebusa living British sponsor. Dimechi. Eja mechia. Pacho winim said way.
Demedruya living bitters nnem hu mfam ina obi trem. Munumi meya hoasin.
Hello my lady. Welcome to Ghana.
Thank you.
Do you know anything about this product?
Living bitters dear. Cedro papa. And what I'm welcome. Maybe to a cotton. Gratitude and channel can living bitters as 25 years near living bitters walk room. We say a man who did a living bitters. Bitters for the living.
Living bitters in your mapping for. Wow, woman colano for and then cola when in fear to me. Capital or two, your shops, our Kanshi, Bubuashi, Dansuman, Bantamakumasi, and a Kofordia. Fre 0270 988 299.
Welcome back from the break, viewers. If you are just joining in, today we are talking to Muhammed Lamin Saidykhan. He happens to be the movement coordinator for African Rising's movement. Okay, now you are in Ghana for a specific reason. Let's stay on that for a bit. We'll come back, to the main African issues, but let's stay on the reason why you're here. Why are you in Ghana?
Yeah, we're here in Ghana to interact with the civil society of Ghana. When I talk about civil society, I'm talking about all the different facets of civil society, from the trade unions or to the faith base, to youth in the movements who are driving things, and then people in art and all those things. So talking about preparing for 25th May, the Africa Day, which we normally organize what we call the continental-wide and diaspora-wide mobilization on Africa Day. And this year's preparation is around looking at the theme called Stopping Slavery and Human Trafficking on the continent, and as well wherever Africans are in diaspora. So
let's stay on that for a bit,
yeah.
just for a bit, and then we come back to those big events, worldwide events.
Yeah.
When you say stopping slavery, exactly what do you mean? Because to the average ear, I mean, we stopped slavery some centuries ago.
Yeah.
So when you say stopping slavery, what are you saying?
Yeah, I'm talking about the modern slavery.
Modern day slavery.
Modern day slavery that is happening now, and then I'm also talking about, the hidden slavery that is happening in many countries in the African continent. Example, Mauritania. More than thousands of people have been enslaved in that country. The Afro Mauritanians community in Mauritania are still under masters. Even when they are freed, they don't even have land to produce the food that they will eat. So that is a serious challenges that are happening in some of the countries that we live in. And then we have been seeing our African brothers and sisters who have been fooled because of lack of employment or lack of livelihood into different dockets in the world where they are used as slaves. So slavery is a reality on the continent, and we've seen a lot of people who have been trafficked out of the continent, especially in the Arab world, or some of the North African countries on the continent, or even some of the countries within Africa. Hidden slavery is happening in different parts of the continent, where people are captured, people are fooled to be given jobs, but eventually they use them as domestic workers, as domestic slaves, without any compensation. And then some of them go through a lot of brutalization, a lot of torture, and even death. Some of them go through that. It's not only about what CNN and others are portraying to the public, or have investigations have shown, but the reality is African people are going through a lot of hell in the name of modern slavery. Let me just give you an example of people in my country, where I come from, in the Gambia. A lot of girls have created a group called Girls Against Human Trafficking.
Girls Against Human Trafficking.
Human trafficking. And then these girls put themselves together when they escaped from their masters in the Arab world, either Lebanon or UAE, United Arab Emirates, or from Qatar or some other countries. When they escaped from there, when they came back, they created that group to sensitize the public, to tell the government and then the people of Gambia that slavery is real. When these people promise us jobs in their countries, when we go there, they never pay us. They use us as donkeys. They use us as animals. They never respect us. They don't even give them good food. They don't even give them good sleeping places, and they work 24 hours. So it's like serving a master. And then it's happening not only in West Africa, but the same thing is happening in East Africa, because they're very closer to this Arab world, and then a lot of them have been enslaved there. When you look at the other aspect of slavery and trafficking, a lot of our young people cannot have jobs in the regions. What they do is they want to search for jobs, and they will take serious journeys to Europe. It's unfortunate that things like this is happening in 2019, where people can be captured and be taken and sold as slaves. Footages of CNN and other media houses have shown that in Libya. And then not only about that, but either we know it or we don't know it, slavery is a reality, and then our people are going through a lot of hell on the continent, and as well the nearby countries in diaspora.
Outside.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you say slavery on the continent, my mind immediately went to colonialism. Is it a natural thing? Is it okay that
it's okay, because a lot of people are not informed about what is happening actually, or they are not fortunate to see people who have gone through some of these things. But as we walk around the continent, interact with all different kind of people within the civil society world or within the citizenry, we're in touch with all of these things that are happening. And as I'm giving you an example of Gambia, there are many examples of other countries. Even the way we treat our domestic workers in the houses. I'll tell you, some of the people treat their mates as slaves on the African. There is no dignity. You know, we're talking about Africans standing for justice, peace, and dignity. So that human dignity is not even there in certain houses. Yesterday, when we were talking about the mobilization of 25th May, you know, some of the people were saying, you know, my focus will be on organizing events to sensitize the privileged Africans to understand that their mates are not slaves. Their mates are not animals. They need to treat them with dignity. So it's like that modern day of slavery is happening in different levels, at different levels. And then we need to be aware of this, and we need to be able to support our brothers and sisters who are going through all these different challenges.
Yeah. Let's stay on justice for a minute. You know, justice caught my attention, so let's stay there for a minute. Now, in terms of justice, there are some structures. You know, I'm looking at justice on the international level, not on the local level. And on the international level, it seems to be really political, you know, where, for instance, the argument has been made consistently that the application, the processes of securing justice normally is different for the African than it is for somebody from elsewhere.
Yeah.
You know, and as an organization, and permit me if I'm wrong and correct me if I'm wrong, I get a sense of an organization that strives for balance and acceptability.
Yeah.
So you're not very radical, are you?
Very radical in terms of protecting the Africans' rights.
In terms of
we are very biased about African.
Okay,
yes.
Okay. But I'm interested in the processes, the how. So on an issue like justice, for instance, what's your stance, you know, on this political issue of Africans are being treated differently from the other people? And, you know, first of all, do you see it that way? And if you do, what do you suggest would be the diplomatic way to deal with it? Yeah,
I think in certain instances, even the way we are treated when we are traveling. Me being a traveler, frequent traveler, in certain airports, I'll give an example. I was traveling from Bangladesh to UK, and I gave my passport to these people, and they said, I need to check in. They said, you know, you cannot check in you in. I said, why? He said, your visa, I don't know whether your visa is correct. I said, but why? He said, no, you know, we have never seen a Gambian traveling from here to UK. I said, what do you mean? He said, no, we have to verify your visa. They spent about 2 hours or 3 hours checking on my visa. So that discrimination on African people is quite evident in different places. But not only talking about that, the injustices on the African continent, on this black skin, is critical. It's very crazy. And then we as African people need to realize that, you know, we have to value ourselves first. So valuing ourselves first is about valuing Africans. When Africans come to a particular country, our brothers and sisters who are in the front line of those countries, what I mean by front line, who are in the front line of immigration, front line of different border points, need to value the African people. Because we tend to see our people being valued, other people being valued than our people in different ways. So that's the lower level injustices that are happening in terms of balance. Every day that we are facing at the border points in different ways. And even the way we treat, you know, foreigners who are Africans, we need to change. We want to see a borderless Africa. We want to see an Africa that you know, everyone feels. When I'm in Ghana, I feel like I'm at home. When Ghanaians are in Gambia, they feel like they're at home because we are the same people. You know, when we check the roots of the people, like for example, me, you know, my forefathers traveled all the way from Guinea to Senegal to Gambia. You know, the Fulani tribes as they move on. When you check in Ghana, even there's the Fulanis here. So it's like Africans migrate and move around. So when we check the history of the Ghana Empire, the Songhai, the Mali, and all those empires that we learn in history, it will tell you that our people are the same people. So how do we bring back that unity, that support that we used to have as African people? But internationally now, as African people, we need to realize that we cannot embrace or we cannot accept unjust rules on the African people. You know, people have been calling on names that, you know, George Bush, Tony Blair, and others need to be taken to Hague because of the injustices that they have and the brutalization of human beings that they have did in different parts of the world. The unfound wars that they have created, and then torturing certain innocent human beings. But we need to realize that the continent in itself need to unify to speak that voice against certain injustices that are happening on certain Africans at that higher level. But there's a whole challenge of creating that guru or that kind of dockets. We are leaders, let's work together in solidarity and protect ourselves. But African people need to be able to protect the continent, the citizens on the continent together, than creating sections of protection for each other. I know when the issue of the current president, the current vice president of Kenya, when they are going through the process in The Hague, they have tried to rally behind all African countries to support them, for African countries to move out of the International Criminal Court or that treaty. That is because they are claiming that it's only Africans that are targeted. So, but the continent need to be able to think around some of these legal processes that are happening and see whether it's really favoring them. But I think it's critical for us.
What solutions would you prefer? Like, what do you think? What's the way forward? How do we deal with these issues?
One thing that I would want to emphasize is it's critical for Africans to be able to tell each other, like African leaders and some African citizens, to have the confidence to be able to tell the leaders that you are too corrupt, you are too brutal, you are a dictator, you are becoming a dictator. You need to do this right. You have to do this right. You need to face each other and tell each other the fact. That's kind of the foundation for justice and for rule of law and then for democracy. We should be able to tell each other that fact. And then leaders to demonstrate that properly. Then when they see injustices against any either a lower level citizen or a higher level citizen at the presidential level, we should be able to work together as African people and then denounce that. Even if it reward us taking certain protest actions against certain international institutions that have been unjust to African people. So, but that unity, that solidarity within the African people is going back to the same solidarity and that same unity that we need to create as people. Yeah.
Okay. So for you, the way forward would be that as African people, we sort of be each other's eye and be the check on each other, perhaps before it escalates into international dimensions, where we have a situation where we would be treated unfairly. Yeah.
So we need to be able to create those. Why can't we create those institutions as African people, and then deal with our issues our own way as African people? For me, what I wanted to see in Africa is I want to see Africa liberated all aspects. Africa have all the capacity to be able to deal with all the justice issues on the continent.
On the continent. I want us to deal with one specific issue on the continent, this issue of violence, because as somebody who travels around a bit, let's talk a little bit of local politics. Here in Ghana today, we are dealing with an issue of vigilantism, political vigilantism, where you have our political parties have, party tax. Unfortunately, some of them are finding their way into national security and things like that. We can give an example of the Nigerian situation, which started in a similar way and has graduated into Boko Haram. That's full terrorism, proper terrorism, against its own people, against their own people. What approach would you recommend, in dealing with an issue like this? It's local, but obviously every local situation tends to have political dimensions and international dimensions, if I can say that. What's your approach to this issue of violence on the continent?
I'll tell you for free that it's not only happening in Ghana or Nigeria or somewhere elsewhere.
I could give the example of Cameroon.
Yeah, it's happening everywhere.
Everywhere,
and then even my country, previously, it's like if you want to develop a dictator, we make dictators ourselves as African people or as people anywhere in the world. When we embrace leaders to create dockets of these vigilante groups, or they call them so-called supporters or movements or whatever, groups or youth groups or whatever, giving them powers, giving them, making them believe that they are above the law, they can do anything, is what is creating all of this. So, politicians are forgetting that, the interests of the nation should surpass whatever interest that they should have. They're forgetting that they are supposed to serve the whole the country. I'll give an example of Gambia. The former regime had what they call the Green Boys. And the Green Boys were so brutal. They will go into rallies, they can even destroy people's rallies, other opposition rallies. And then they can even go and attack certain families who they feel that they are opposition. So they saw similar things happening in this new regime, like the Barrow regime, the Barrow government, where they created a group called Barrow Youth Movement. So people were fearing that the same thing will happen. So for me, I think the government themselves, as the leadership, who are in the leadership in the front line and are fortunate to be voted in, need to be honest, and then they need to really live to what they have promised the people. They are there for the interest of the country and the nation, and they should serve that interest. The oppositions or the politicians, strong politicians, they should be able to strongly condemn the violent vigilantes that are happening across the continent. And then we should be able to, as civil society organizations, movements like Africans Rising, should be able to denounce some of those vigilante groups that are creating violence and creating chaos within the countries that we live in. I had a little bit of news about what happened in Ghana, and then I've been seeing what's happening in Nigeria. It's really something that, as a person, as an African citizen, condemning this kind of vigilante action, and I'm, hoping that the governments will live to what they have sworn for.
Promise the people.
Yeah.
But then my question then becomes, still actually is, what's the way forward? Because there's the notion that as a people we like to talk, but we hardly ever do.
Yeah.
Now we all appreciate that violence on the continent is a bad thing. It's a horrible thing. It has, dark consequences for the people, for the continent. We all appreciate this fact. We all see all the time how bad it is. Are there any concrete things we could do as a people to ensure that these groupings, whichever parts of the continent perhaps they may find expression, are dealt with? Can you think of any way?
I think
of dealing with it.
Yeah, I think that's what I said. It all goes back to how are we creating institutions? If the police in Ghana are well equipped and well supported and are properly independent, they should be able to deal with anyone who uses the police uniform or police equipments and acting as police. That's a threat to national security in itself.
That's national insecurity.
So it's a threat. It's a serious threat to national security. So the police in itself should be very much independent in dealing with that particular issue, and elsewhere. So the government need to be able to create institutions that will be able to protect the citizens, and they should not allow any other formation. They should not be given any other formation. But the whole challenge is around the political challenge that we have. Our leaders are so biased that they bring groups that they feel like these people will keep me to power. When they do certain things, they want to tell the police, massage this, don't bring this out. Let's take this thing out of court, things like that. So, but if you have very just systems in place, the courts, the judiciary is very independent, and then our politicians at the legislative level are very much putting the country first. Then they'll be able to deal with certain things. Now, when it comes to issues around these vigilante groups, it should not be like party lines in any way. The judiciary should be able to deal with
a crime as a crime.
As a crime. These people should be treated as criminals, so that others will not have courage to repeat it. But if a government massages it and then it goes like that, eventually others will test it, and then gradually it can become out of hand, like what is happening in Nigeria.
Yeah, and hopefully what will never happen in Ghana.
Yes.
Hopefully.
we never pray for that.
Hopefully. Well, let's take a break. Let's take another quick break. This will be our last break, and then we come back, and then we go back to the issue of the events itself, because we digressed a little, didn't we?
Yeah.
So we'll come back after the break, deal with that, and then we can end the conversation. Stay with us.
Thank you.
Yes, Dad. Everything has been installed. Yes. Okay. I will be fine, Dad.
Yeah, but this debate tonight.
You gotta keep Blanco. Go do the far job. Charlie High Tech.
She the lie bad go happen tonight. This are no fence.
They couldn't get in this time.
How come?
Security warehouse.
Smart choice. I guess you have some footage for me there.
Crystal clear picture. Pause. I think I know this man. He has a long history with robbery and rape. You are fortunate to have equipped your house with gadgets from Security Warehouse. Call it in. We'll begin the investigation from here.
Control, come over.
Welcome back from the break, viewers. We have been talking to the movement coordinator for Africans Rising, which is a movement. His name is Muhammed Lamin Saidykhan. Am I getting the name right?
Yes, very well. It's Saidykhan. Like a Gambian, huh? See,
I could easily be a Gambian. Saidykhan. And so far, we've spoken about the continent, the way we see the continent today. You know, we've tried to perhaps delve into specific issues on the continent, such as this issue of justice. We've spoken about violence in Ghana, violence in Nigeria, sort of. We've also spoken about, you know, this issue of solidarity, you know, and perhaps the dimensions or the form it should take considering the diverse needs of the continent. But the meat of this conversation actually is going to be, or is centered, you know, on this event that is global in nature. So this event where, you know, this movement seeks to have all of us, you know, celebrate our Africanness on a specific date. Interesting, right?
Yep.
Tell me more about that. I'm very interested. And this is on the 25th of May.
Yeah.
So what's happening on the 25th of May?
Okay. I think we all remember as African people that 25th May, Africa created its own organization where we thought that the journey of liberation began when Nkrumah and others met in Addis on 25th of May 1963 to create that African organization that represent the true liberation of Africa, or let's say that represent the journey, that start the journey of liberation of Africa. So when we met in Arusha, Tanzania in 2016, when we are validating the idea of Africans Rising, we felt that, you know, the whole movement's idea is to continue the liberation that our forefathers have started, and so that we realize what we call the true liberation of African people. So in 2017, we did a launch of the movement across the continent and as well in diaspora. So about 42 countries organized activities simultaneously in about 300 activities were organized simultaneously across the continent. And in 2018 as well, we organized in 56 countries across the continent and 49 in Africa, across the world and 49 in Africa, where 70 events were simultaneously organized. So this year, the events are normally based, or the year's mobilization is normally based on a particular theme. And this year's theme is looking at stopping slavery and human trafficking, which we believe that is a big challenge on the continent, and then these issues our brothers and sisters are facing with because of different challenges. Why they are even going out to search for greener pastures, but also there are existing slavery actions happening within the continent that we need to deal with as African people.
As African people.
Yeah.
So on the 25th of May, what is happening?
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
You know, as a Ghanaian lady living in Ghana, you know, what's my interest? What's my role in all of this? On the
25th of May, we want all Africans to rethink about how they want to see this continent, you know, achieving its true liberation, economically, socially, you know, all the different aspects of what they define liberation to be as African people. And then we also want them to reflect as individuals, how can we work together in achieving that liberation. Calling it down to the team, we want to see people organizing events. It can be even a house chat. It can even be a street action, or it can be a meeting, or it can be a street cleaning. It can be any kind of event that people can think of that they want to organize to create, you know, a sensation about an issue, a particular issue that is affecting them or affecting the livelihood or the society in any way. Or even maybe doing an interview condemning certain injustices that are happening
on the continent,
in your community, or maybe having a dialogue with the policymaker, either your area MP or maybe a particular minister, or even at the presidency level, or at the continent regional level, at ECOWAS level, or maybe at other regional, sub-regional bodies, or even at the continental body level, or even if you're in diaspora as well. You might want to bring your diaspora folks together to talk about certain issues that are affecting African diasporas or African migrants in the diaspora. So it's like there is no closed template in terms of what can be done, but it's like people to be more creative and innovative in terms of what events and activities can they organize to celebrate Africa Day, to also reflect on the past of the continent, and also to think about how we can work together, you know, in either putting pressure on our governments, but also, you know, uploading some of the good things that are happening in Africa, but also challenging power, and then trying to ensure that Africa is redirected on the right path.
On the right path. On the flyer, you know, I'm trying to retrieve the flyer, but on the flyer I saw that you said there were, you know, you highlighted, hold on one second for me, you highlighted 72 events in 56 countries. You know, so what are these events, for instance? Give me two events in 2 countries.
Yeah, so like these are last year's events actually. It's talking about a summary of what happened last year.
Oh, okay.
So last year, I'll just give an example of events that happened in last year. Like in Dakar, we organized a big seminar where artists came, people from
like a concert.
Yeah, like people coming from different aspects for the whole day. They had some panel discussions about issues of migration, issues of you know, the corruption, and then how much Africa is losing in terms of money, because the theme was around stop the bleeding of the African people or African communities. So in the evening there have been big concerts where artists came in, you know, did their songs, and then a lot of happenings were done in Senegal. In other places, there, you know, people play football. You know, so people play football and then, you know, talk about, during their breaks, they talk about issues that they are facing. In other places, people did street cleaning or beach cleaning, you know, talking about, you know, we don't want our beach to be polluted anymore. You know, in other places, you know, people organize dances, you know, and then eventually they had able to have a conversation around this. In other places, people had seminars, people had press conferences, people had Twitter chats or Facebook chats about issues that are affecting African. In other places, people even had, you know, conversation with policymakers, challenging a particular policy, and then ensuring that, you know, there's changes in certain way of operations of governments. So people are free to choose different innovative actions that they feel that they can do on that day, and then the African Rising movement is trying to connect all of that. So the movement is trying to support, connect, and amplify the struggles of the people. So it's like bringing that connection within the African people's struggles, which have not been there. We want to create that, and then we want to make people believe that, okay, the particular struggle that we are facing in Ghana is maybe similar to what people are facing in Uganda or in Zimbabwe. So creating that synergy and then that togetherness as African people to understand that then we need to work together to be able to end slavery in all the countries, because people in Kenya are affected by this. Today I was checking on Facebook this morning, I saw, you know, one of the activists in Uganda has posted, you know, all these young women who are dressed in this Ibado stuff, cover their heads and everything, at the airport, and they said, you know, all these people are going to be sold as slaves in Saudi Arabia or somewhere in the Middle East. So it shows that, you know, we need to do something about this challenge, because our young girls have been taken for domestic work, but eventually they are maltreated in different ways.
In different ways. Okay. So we will have this event on the 25th of May, And, you know, all across the continent, people would have different activities and all of these things. But beyond this activity, I just want, because we are ending the conversation, I want you to take us home on a positive note, you know, because we spoke about the situation on the ground, you know, within the continent, and we all agree that it can be better than it is. Yeah. But, you know, we are working towards a positive end. So if you could leave us with a positive message, you know, to give us some hope, because I believe there's a lot of hope for the continent, and then we can round up the conversation.
Yeah, I think the hope is this continent is the cream of the world. We have the required resources, we have the required capability, and we have the human capital. The leadership of African countries need to trust in its generation of now and the generation of tomorrow. That is young people. We need to see how we can help the young people to realize their dreams. With that, I think the Africa that we want will be achieved. And
Thank
together,
you so much.
we will rise.
Together we will rise. I like that. Yeah. Together we will rise. Thank you so much for your time. Muhammed Lamin Saidykhan, it's great to have you here in Ghana. It's great to have you in the studio. Great to have you on the couch. Yeah. Do return. Come back.
Thank you.
And please try Ghana Jollof before you leave.
Yes, I will try that. I will try that and see whether compared to Gambia one.
Okay, so have you ever had Ghana Jollof?
Yes, I had Ghana Jollof.
And you have had the Gambian Jollof?
Yes.
Which is better?
I think I'm told that Gambian is better.
You are told?
Yeah, I'm told.
But you tasted both.
Yeah, for me.
So you tell me. Remember, you are in Ghana.
For me, the best jollof rice that I tasted is Senegal. But
my goodness. Yes, Muhammad. I'll take it. I'll take it. You have to. You have to try the Ghanaian jollof again.
Okay, again.
And revise your notes.
All right. When I come back to the course, I'll give you the information of which one.
I'm not leaving you alone until you say Ghana jollof is better.
Ghana jollof actually is better than Nigeria jollof.
And better than Gambian jollof.
Gambian one, I'm not sure.
Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Wish you all the best, and we hope to see the Africa that we all want.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, viewers, this has been a show. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Stay with Pan African TV because we are truly, truly African. Bye.